Hey friends, welcome back to another Field and Garden podcast. It is your friend Lisa Mason Ziegler, and thanks so much for dropping in here today. And I am really excited about our chat today that I'm going to be having with Dee Hall of the Mermaid City Flowers in Norfolk, Virginia, which for anyone that's not familiar where I am, she is just across the creek, better known as the Chesapeake Bay from me, not very far. And I'm super excited to talk to her. But before we jump in, just some housekeeping, right? So if you are not familiar with the Gardener's Workshop, we'd love for you to drop in over at thegardenersworkshop.com and see what the work is that we're doing. We are all about helping people grow, cut flowers, whether you are a home gardener, a budding flower farmer, or a seasoned flower farmer. We have tons of resources as well as our online garden shop. And you'll find that all at thegardenersworkshop.com. And I would love for you to connect with me on social media. You'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Clubhouse, and you can make all those connections through our website, as well as I have a YouTube channel, friends. So if you want to see as much as hear, drop in over there, and I would love it for you to subscribe. So before I bring Dee into this conversation, I just want to tell y'all how this all happened for me. So y'all all know that I started flower farming back in the dinosaur age, right? Barely had internet back then. And back then, before the internet, a big part of learning about stuff was either through the newspaper and through magazines. And I mean, I was so thrilled and honored when Country Garden magazines featured us. And right before that happened, I was blessed enough to be found out by our local garden writer, Kathy Van Mullicum, who was the garden writer for the Daily Press, our local newspaper. I'm going to guess 20 years maybe. Anyway, Kathy kind of stumbled upon me and I became her novelty project, I think. She started featuring us in the newspaper, 2 or 3 times a year, which is a lot for a little small business, right? And so that went on for about 8 or 9 years. We would get featured, and I give a big, kudos to the Daily Press, which is also now the Virginian Pilot, where they featured, small local businesses. Well, of course, as the world grew and internet became more important, newspapers kind of fell aside, although I do still get the newspaper every day, y'all. A lot of other ways came available, which of course we know is the internet and then social media. So our local newspaper for a period of time didn't even have a garden section on Sunday anymore. And we just kind of suffered through quietly. Well, in the past year or two, they have brought it back. And imagine my surprise, friends. It was probably about 2 months ago, sitting at the breakfast table as we do, and we had a breakfast, and Steve passed me the home and garden section of the newspaper, and I open it, and who is on the front page of it, full page, but Dee Hall. Dee, I just can't even tell you how thrilled I was to see that picture of you.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting and unexpected. The way that came about, and I didn't even know that it was going to be like on the front page of that section until it appeared. It appeared, and I was just like, I was kind of in shock. It was surprising. It was really fantastic too.
And that's kind of the way the newspaper is. They never promise anything, and so I obviously at first glance knew that she was a flower farmer because she was holding an armful of obviously garden grown flowers. And I was just so thrilled, and it just brought back so many good memories of a lot of stuff for me. And so let's just jump in here from there, Dee. And I have gathered from stalking you a little bit, that's what we do nowadays, right? It's like, all right, who is she and where'd she come from, right? So I gather from your website that you grew up in a family that people gardened and had a love of the land and taking care of their garden. Is that right?
Absolutely. My grandmother especially. So my mom's side of the family is from St. Lucia, and I partially grew up there, even though I was born in New York. And my grandmother, when they bought their their property, maybe, 70, 75 years ago. It's pretty close to the beach. She was always a gardener, but there was just sand there. So she had to trucked in all this soil. My mom will tell the story of her trucking in all this soil. There were a few flowers she loved especially. So like, I remember her always having cactus. She had this night blooming cactus, and it was a big deal. She would call her friend who was a photographer to make sure she got like her photo of her night blooming cactus. She would have roses, that were brought in on a ship from the UK, because she was a big rose grower still. She passed a few years ago, but all those plants are still existing in her garden. So I was always surrounded by plants. I remember her getting up early in the morning to water before, kind of sunlight, and it got too hot to really be out in the garden. That's something as flower farmers we understand, like trying to be out there early, cutting and get everything ready before, that summer sun hits. And then, later on in New York, I grew up across the street from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. And so, and one of my neighbors was a big community activist and gardener. She had a children's garden in the neighborhood that I was a member of, and the children's garden at the botanical garden. So I was lucky to just kind of always be around people who love gardens and who love flowers, and kind of pass that love on through me. It was, organic, it was natural.
And so we have two other things in common, besides both being featured in the newspaper and kind of giving us a little kickstart, right? Is you are an urban farmer, right? You're located in the middle of the city.
Yes. Yeah. So I have like a fairly large corner lot for the city. It's about a quarter of an acre. My garden, it actually started off just as a pollinator patch. I just, wanted to remove the grass in the front yard and kind of do something for better environmental benefits. And then we had some trees that were kind of diseased and needed to be removed. So it was a chance to expand. My neighbor across the street, who also has a large lot, noticed that what I was doing, and he offered up his space. He had already built garden beds. He loves flowers, but he's not a gardener. So he had already built garden beds. And then he has rain barrels that he's connected to drip tape, and they're on a pump. So I got lucky that I have this neighbor also who has a great love of plants and can do all these cool things, and offered up his space. I'll tell him, I'm planting ranunculus. He's like, great. I wish I knew what that was. I'm sure it's going to be beautiful. And then it's kind of expanded from there. Actually, someone saw me in the paper and offered up additional sunny growing space. So I need to get that set up. I'm getting that set up pretty soon. I have, all the warm season annuals that are just about ready to go into that space as well. So it just kind of
is growing out of control. Yeah. Oh, this all sounds so familiar. And the other thing that we have in common, I read that you said when you went to plan your wedding, you wanted local flowers. Yes. And that, in fact, back when that happened for me 27 years ago, however long ago that was, I didn't really know I wanted local flowers, but that's exactly what I was describing to the florist and how I wanted them presented. Like I just walked outside. I was a gardener. I didn't even know that flower farming was a thing, really a lot back then. So we have a lot of actual things in common. Before we jump into your flower farming, what was your previous passion and career? What is your job been up until this? And are you doing flower farming full time?
So I was doing property management before, and I found myself often giving advice on plants. I kind of became the de facto plant lady for, homeowners. We managed HOAs and condos. And so that's what I did professionally. But I got really close to one of our landscapers. And so I'd be like, hey, can you repot this for me? And my boss really loved plants as well. So there was a lot of plant talk and plant trading in the office as well. So that was my professional background. And so now, I'm doing flower farming pretty much full time. I do have a little side business that I do as well. But you know, growing things keeps me pretty busy. And you know, since that newspaper feature, I've had so many people, you know, call, I saw you in the paper, or walk by, I saw you in the paper, and want more information. And it's kind of just been growing from there. I think people can kind of often underestimate the importance of local news. I mean, I'm a subscriber too. I get mine digitally, but I know how important it is. And being in the paper just, you know, reiterated that, certainly.
Okay. So, I have so many questions. So first off, it just appears to me that you have had so many doors opened to you from your neighbors offering up. And I think it's a gift that your neighbor doesn't know anything about plants, because then he's not out there kind of helping you make decisions, which you don't really need, you know, because flower farming is 100% different than landscaping and regular gardening, right? So what turned you on to flower farming? I mean, what did you see? What led you down this path?
I mean, so I've always been a gardener, and kind of at the point where I couldn't find the flowers I was looking for the wedding, and I grew dahlias. And, you know, like a lot of people, you grow dahlias for the first time and you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it kind of spiraled from there. I was like, I have this space. I'm, you know, gaining all this usable space. You know, I know that there is a void kind of in the local flower community. And so who better than me to get it started? I'm going to be out here, you know, digging in the dirt anyway. It didn't seem like that much of a stretch for me to move from, you know, having the garden to kind of launching into flower farming.
All right. So let's talk about some facts. Let's talk space and where do you sell and the services. So first, how much space would you guesstimate that you have, just to give people an idea of kind of what you're doing?
About a half acre total, kind of here and there. So it's my lot, my neighbor's lot. Then, you know, so the gardener that I grew up with in New York, she still sends me plants all the time. I love her dearly. So sometimes I got a box of 500 tulips, and I posted on Facebook, like, I got, you know, these surprise tulips, and a neighbor was like, well, you can plant them in my yard if you'd like. And so those went there. It's kind of, so a half acre total in different spaces throughout my neighborhood. I'm really lucky to live in a community that really values the beauty of flowers, and kind of, you know, understands how important it is, the big environmental benefit. You know, being here in Norfolk, we're pretty close to the water. And so we kind of get to see what happens, you know, with sea level rise and all the changes. Right. People will sometimes even walk by and say, like, have you seen many bees in your garden? Because I'm not seeing that in mine. And we kind of just talk about that kind of thing. At this point this year, I am doing subscriptions, you know, one-off arrangements. I'm doing workshops, and then I'm doing small events as well. A few markets here and there. Last year I was at market, you know, every other week, which is, you know, is like really intense. And I decided to kind of pull back from that to try to find more balance, you know, as like a one-woman show as it's expanding. But so, I've just been doing, you know, pickup markets here and there, but it's mostly subscriptions and workshops now.
You know, I so relate to what you're talking about. I mean, I was a one-woman show for the first 10 years of my business. And I did a couple of farmers markets, and I was selling to florists. And I mean, you can only do that for so long. And I will say that seeking out, certainly you need to throw and to see what sticks on the wall. You know, what is your niche? And you're like me, we're in the second largest metropolitan area in the state of Virginia. So there is no end to the possibilities of the areas to sell, I mean, the opportunities to sell your flowers. And that to me is the biggest challenge, because it makes you run from this one to that one, to that one, to that one, to that one. And then you, at the end of the day, you feel like you've done nothing and you didn't do any of them very well. I mean, am I telling you my story here or what? You know, so it is where the people that listen to this that say, oh my gosh, I'm in the middle of nowhere and I have to drive 2 hours to a collective or to the big city to sell my flowers. There's challenges on both sides of this opportunity. But totally get farmers markets were real. I did farmers markets for 14 years. They're literally a big part of what built my business, but it was the hardest work I did.
It is. And I don't have a cooler yet. So that's a huge challenge with market. That means that, you know, I cannot prep too far in advance. I'm usually prepping the day before for markets. I have some friends that have some cooler space that I can kind of borrow, but you know,
you got to run all over town to do that. And who has time for that? That's what you're going to soon find out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think I'm reaching a point now where I'm going to have to get a cooler. I'm going to have to go ahead and do that, figure out where it's going to go, where I'm going to put it. I'm in the city and kind of how it's going to go from there. Like this year I had all my tulips come like fairly earlier than anyone else. Luckily, I sold them all to eager customers who were kind of really hungry for flowers at that point, especially like, you know, the doubles and the parrots and all those, you know, beautiful, you know, tulips that you can't like walk into a grocery store and get. But that, you know, that was challenging. And this year I've had florists interested. So I have one florist that I've been selling to and a few others. I guess I actually need to get my availability list started here pretty soon after this holiday rush. You know, I'm going to start trying to move into getting that done regularly.
Yeah, it's, you know, I just so remember being where you are, Dee. I mean, just so many opportunities when you're just starting out, you're hungry. First off, you know, it's like hungry, meaning you don't know what exactly you want to do 100%. And so it just really sounds like you have a lot of opportunities and that things are going to just go as you figure it out, right? So what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions, if you had some, about now doing it compared to what you thought it was going to be? You know what I mean? Everybody says, oh my gosh, you're a flower farmer. That must be the dreamiest job in the world. And it is, but it's the hardest job in the world, if you ask me. And so are there any like revelations that have happened for you since you've been in the trenches?
You know, that it doesn't start like in the spring when everything is pretty and nice. Like we're working during the winter. We're working during the winter time, right? Whether it's, you know, putting in plugs here or you know, seedlings in late fall for our cool flowers, or, you know, prepping soil or whatever it is. It doesn't start when you see the beautiful flowers. By the time, like, I was outside the other day planting my weekly sunflowers per
Good
Lisa
girl. Good girl.
And there were already, you know, mosquitoes out, and, you know, so you're hot, you're sweaty, you know, you're outside all the time. And it's difficult to turn it off when you're, you know, when it's at your home or it's nearby. It's constant. It's, you know, it's just all work all the time. You know, some flowers, you go one day, there's no color, and the next day you go, you look, the tulips have blown open. So, I mean, it's constant kind of, especially when you're one person doing it, there's constant gatekeeping. You're literally watching flowers grow to make sure that you're, you know, harvesting in time and getting that for whatever it is that you need. So yeah, that for sure. I didn't think about, you know, how much behind the scenes work there kind of is to make that beautiful photo for Instagram or whatever it is, you know?
It's so very, very true. And I tell you, the hardest lesson that I had to learn, and I can still remember it, I'm sitting here at my desk looking out over one of our gardens, which used to be the neighboring horse pastures here on our farm. And the farmer that farmed that, he and I were the last farmers in the city of Newport News. And Oliver was 96, I think, when he passed away about 5 or 6 years ago. Anyway, we had a lot of great fence discussions. And the lesson I learned from him was one day, Dee, I was out there, 2 o'clock on a day of 95 degrees, on the verge of dying from heat stroke, doing my job, because I had all these orders and all these flowers that had to be cut. And he pulled up to the fence and I'm grumbling to myself, I do not want to stop and talk to him right now. I do not have time. And then he stopped and just sat there and stared at me. I thought, well, I guess I'm going to talk to Oliver for a minute. And I went over to the fence and he said, what in the world is wrong with you? I said, Oliver, I just can't get it all done. I wake up with a list to do. And when I go to bed that night, there's more things to do on the list than when I woke up. Yeah. And Oliver said, let me tell you something about farming that I learned after he was a dairy farmer, which is even more work than a flower farm, believe it or not. He said that I farm 5 days a week. I start at 6 o'clock in the morning and I stop at 4 o'clock. Anything that I can't get done during that time just doesn't get done. It's a matter of you, in my words, triaging what's really important and what really affects it, and stop looking out your window. And every time I looked out my window, Dee, all I saw was things that needed to be done. You need to look out your window and appreciate what we're doing. Yeah. And when he gave me this talk, it's like, all right, he did it. He was a hugely successful farmer. He was a land baron because of, history and having big farmland, right? Where cities popped up. I thought if he doesn't have to farm every day from sun up to sundown, then I don't have to. And just making that decision in my mind to say, all right, I'm drawing a line in the sand. I go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I stop at 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And if it doesn't get done during that time, it's just not important. And I'm here to tell you, Dee, that time will come for you. You may not be there yet because you are still figuring it out, but there is a pot at the end of the rainbow.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I totally understand all of that. So I want to kind of walk away from the flower farming thing, which is I'm just so excited for you and everything that is happening. I also came to know you through seeing on social media a new book. Is it out yet? Is it actually available or is it still in pre-order?
It's out now.
Okay. Yeah. So the book, Black Flora. And so I want you to tell us about that book, what that book is about. And I know you're one of the farmers featured in there, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the book, Black Flora, is kind of a look at various Black flower farmers, designers, florists, and other creatives in the industry. And I mean, it's a really fantastic book. I've, been lucky enough to get to know some of the people, through the book and different things that we've had to do. It's on Blue Imprint. Deborah Prinzing approached me last year. I'm a Slow Flower Society member and, asked if I would, agree to be interviewed. And I was by, Terry Spate, Cottage and Court, who's fantastic and who told me she's worked with you and had nothing but great things to say about you. And, so that's how I ended up becoming, a part of the book. And I'm really, honored and thrilled to be included in something that's so unique and be able to get to know new Black creatives in the floral industry through that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for connecting with other people that are doing what you're doing. Sure. And I did have a connection with Terry from years ago, and we won't go down that rabbit hole of how she and I were involved in a little business thing that back when I was first getting my start with launching an online garden shop, and totally love Terry and have been in and out of contact with her. And of course, we also are Slow Flowers members, and I'm actually a sponsor of her podcast. And so Deborah is now creating and producing books under, is it In Bloom? Is that the official name of the publishing house?
Bloom Imprint.
Bloom Imprint, and that's a publishing house that Deborah works with another person, I believe, and creates these just creative books, and it's just really, really exciting. So where can people find that book?
It's everywhere. It's on, Amazon, it's Barnes and Nobles, it's here. My local bookstore in Norfolk carries it. I'm friends with the owner, and I was like, hey, there's this new book you should carry.
Awesome.
And I just happened to be in it. So everywhere books are sold.
That is awesome. Yeah, so that is really great. Now, I understand that you are also working to create, or have already created, what is called the Tidewater Collective. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, so the Tidewater Flower Collective is a group. I jokingly like to say that I bullied people into being my friends on the internet, but when I started growing here, I started to look for and kind of keep an eye on any growers that would pop up. Like I had a few hashtags I would look at, and anytime Instagram suggested you might like this person that's nearby, I said, hey, I'm putting together a little group, would you like to be in it? And people kept saying yes. And I think there are about 25 of us now, between like up in Newport News to the Eastern Shore, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Norfolk, all around Hampton Roads. And it's been really great to have a community of local growers. Sometimes you just need somebody to commiserate with. Like the other day, someone didn't water their Lysiantha seedlings enough, and they burned, and so there was just commiseration with that. And I had some extra, and I was like, well, I have these, if you want to, you can come get them, or meeting up with people. It's nice to have people you can talk to about flowers that are not like your spouse or your family member that's sick of hearing about
so true.
I need to net this plant or whatever it is that you need to do. So it's been great to have that little group, and out of that, a co-op has actually formed that's based here in Norfolk. I was one of the founders. I've stepped back a little bit, again, trying to get some life balance, but they are up and running and getting ready to have their grand opening soon. So that's pretty exciting. And it's made up of, mostly like fairly urban growers. Everybody's growing on like 2 acres or less. So that's an exciting thing that's coming to Hampton Roads now.
That's pretty awesome. So for those folks that don't know, so a collective and a co-op, co-ops and collectives are a little bit different, but they basically have the same end model. That is where local flower farmers are selling their flowers collectively, meaning whether it's one person that owns the collective and is buying from and having local growers come in and sell, or it's a group of growers that come together, and basically it is starting a whole nother business. And I will tell you, I have come to know so much more about it since my conversations with Amelia Ilo of Rooted Farmers, who did that course for us. I mean, it is truly starting a whole nother business. And I totally understand now why there has to be an admin person over all of that. It is really, really deep. And anybody that wants to learn more about collectives, there's a great, well, we have a course on our thegardenersworkshop.com, but on that page, there's information as well as a little video that you can kind of like get a better idea. I personally believe, because Amelia reached out to me to do that course, but I have been preaching for 2 years that I believe that collectives are the future ramping up of the domestic flower grower.
Absolutely.
Don't you agree? I mean,
yes. And Amelia has been really, she has a really unique platform in Rooted Farmers. And she was quite helpful to us, when we were getting up and running and talking about the different options for what it could look like. I mean, can't thank her enough for all the advice and time. I don't know how she has time to do everything she does, quite frankly, but it's been fantastic, especially for, like smaller growers who may not have the access, or there are people who don't, they don't want to get out and do markets or, go to florists themselves or whatever. So this is a good option for them to be able to grow and to move their product and sell kind of in a concentrated way on a regular schedule, for sure.
That's such a great way to describe it. So, I mean, it basically allows growers, no matter how big or how small, to grow and to deliver their product somewhere where that place's focus is to sell the flowers. Yes. And the farmer gets to farm, and that is just really, it's such a revolutionary idea. So you mentioned Amelia's Rooted Farmers. So just for everybody to know, Rooted Farmers is actually a platform that, in a nutshell, it's Etsy for flower farmers. That's where there's an online platform that connects buyers to sellers. And because of Amelia's experience building and running this platform, which is nationwide, it's rootedfarmers.com. She works with a lot of collectives, and that has really, in my book, put her at the top of the pile as far as an expert on seeing all the different ways a collective can work, the problems, the good things. And I agree with you. She is an amazing teacher, mentor, leader. And I don't know how she does it. She has kids, she has a flower farm, she has Rooted Farmer, and she helps people that are trying to start collectives. And that's what led her to start to create this course called Collectives 101, which you can find on our website. Super. I mean, if you're even thinking about selling to a collective, it really gives you the book look at what it's all about. All right, Dee. So let's just say, Dee, what do you think? I know this, I mean, it changes for me every year, but I'm going to ask you, what is your kind of goal, dream of what your business would be like 5 years from now if you could have it your way?
Well, I mean, I have a couple of different ideas, but so I mean, I love growing. I've thought about, what would it look like if I was not like outside, doing cutting and growing, or I kind of love being involved in all the different aspects. But I think I would like to, continue to concentrate on a subscription model and maybe, workshops, and kind of find, so I have looked for I was looking for bigger urban spaces in Norfolk because I wanted to, kind of stay local. We border agricultural areas, and I could go someplace else and, rent or get more space, but I'd like to stay here where I am and got started, and, where I'm part of the community, to have a bigger space, to have some help maybe would be nice with that as well. But I'm kind of just letting myself, like you said, I'm throwing, stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And, we'll see what happens. There's so many goals. It's hard to kind of put it.
I understand. And, I think that you are so fortunate to have so many. Again, being in the city has a lot of challenges sometimes, whether it's neighbors or city ordinances that you have to like mold your business around. But the gift is that our customers are right outside of our property borders. And you just have to find the way to meet them. And when I say to meet them, to sell your flowers, because that's the bottom line, right? In a way that it's profitable, that you're enjoying it, and that you're able to do. And I just want to encourage you that having a half an acre, we produce tens of thousands of flowers a season off of a half an acre. You don't really necessarily have to have as much space as folks think. It's just getting better at squeezing more out of what you got. And so Dee, share with folks, how can they connect with you through Instagram, Facebook, your website? Give them all the lowdown on that.
Yeah, so my website, I'm at mermaidcityflowers.com. Same on Instagram, on Facebook. I spend a lot of time on social like a lot of people, so I'm pretty accessible. I have email, my phone number is on my website too. Just however you can think of, by reach me. If you're my neighbor, walk by, knock on my door. I had somebody come and knock on the door and say, oh, I saw this paper. I thought I'd give you a copy of the paper if you didn't have one already. Just, all those kinds of things. I'm pretty easy to find. And I like making community, obviously, bringing people together. So yeah, reach out.
Yeah. And something you just said reminded me of something I wanted to mention earlier, how you said that you still get the paper too digitally. I get it digitally and paper. My old man, Stevie, loves to have the paper in his hand. But I think that in the flower farming business, because we're selling local, right? If you expect your local outlets like that to come to you, you have to also patronize them. And so I just really, sometimes I will just comment to whoever wrote an article in the local newspaper. That's a great way to make them aware. You don't have to really put it in their face. You should have your tagline after your name on your emails, your name, the name of your farm, cut flowers sold locally or whatever, and send them a comment and bait them. And I think that you and I are the poster child of what it can actually do for your business. And so
people find out, they're like, these are grown here? I'm like, yeah, I grow them right down the street in Norfolk, and people are always shocked. Like, yes, you can do this. You can grow stuff right here in the heart of the city.
And you know what? That'll never go away. Over 2 decades, and people still can't believe what we produced from our little urbans. I mean, I'm totally surrounded by houses now. And so I'm just like you. I just have a little bit more space at this point in time. And yeah, so that's part of the fun, is sharing that gift of what a small little backyard can give people. So Dee, thank you so much for joining me here. And I know that I'm going to be hearing and seeing more about you, as we are close to one another, about 30 minutes away. And I look forward to our paths crossing again sometime soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. All right, friends, if you're enjoying the Field and Garden podcast, I would love for you to post a review. It helps so much. You don't realize, I didn't realize what reviews do on anything. Every time you post a review, that makes the platform that you're listening to this on share my podcast with more people that are browsing. The same on books and products. And if you get the book Black Flora and you love it, please scream it from the rooftops, right? Especially on the big book producers or book sales platforms. So if you want to learn more about the Gardener's Workshop, head over to thegardenersworkshop.com. We will put in the show notes the connections that you can connect with Dee in case you miss those. And Dee, I'm just so encouraged. I'm so glad that you joined me here today. So till we meet again, friends.
Thank
Ciao.
you.
You're welcome.